Shut up and sit down.
Hi guys, this is Big Mech's Workshop and Paint Studio. I'm Dodge, and this week we are painting the Primaris Chaplain. One of the reasons we're painting the Chaplain is we don't do enough stuff for the Imperium of Man, as a few of our subscribers will tell you. So we thought over this next month we've been throwing in a few more of these. Also, we keep getting requests to do black armor, so he's the perfect example of that. So anyone who plays Raven Guard, this armor tutorial should be good for you. Now, firstly, I did start with a black primer, but off camera I used Scale 75's Negro Black, and that was a complete coverage of the armor. Now, at the moment, I'm going to be using Scale 75's Negro Grey, and this is really watered down because I'm going to use glazing techniques on this. The reason I painted the Negro Black beforehand was the black primer was not the colour I wanted, but I needed something for the paint to stick to. This is very thin paint, and I'm just going to keep working it like a non-metallic sort of style to the top edges of all the armour where the sheen would hit. Because it's black, there's no colour to it, which makes it difficult. Now what I've done is add a small amount of grey blue by Model Air to the Negro Grey. This is going to add a tiny bit of colour into it, but not so much that it's going to start looking blue. I'm going to start going over those edges with my glazing as well, what we've already done, but I'm going to start working a little bit further back. As you can see that effect building up there over time. Now I'm going to add a small amount of pale grey blue to that same mix by Model Colour, and I'm using a Winsor & Newton Series 7, and I'm doing the tiniest little glazes that I can around all those sharp edges. You will find once I've done this that it looks a lot sharper and a lot brighter than it should do, but we're going to go back and tone that down. So don't be too worried about going a bit too bright with it. We can tone it back down. They are muted colours, so going up and down from black and white should actually be quite easy with a bit of practice. See, this is the progress I've made, and as you can see, it's gone quite bright, but that's absolutely fine. It does enable you to see your highlights properly and where the light spots are going to be, and also it helps it show up on camera for you guys. So it's not the smoothest of blending, but we're not finished yet. We are going to tone this down. So we're going to go back straight to the Scale 75's Negro Grey, and this time we're going to start from the light areas and start pushing the brush back the opposite way. We're going to cover those light areas with this colour, and because we've got the Negro Grey underneath, it's going to basically seal it in between the two layers there, and it's going to really thin out the brighter colours, and they're just going to act as a filter in the middle. And what you'll start to notice is it starts to look a lot smoother. Unfortunately, the best glazing I did on this metal armour happened to be at the back of the leg, which unfortunately doesn't show up under this cloak that the Chaplain is wearing. So yeah, that kind of sucked. Next, I'm going to use Steel Legion Drab for the rib cage. I'm assuming this is a display rib cage. I mean, this is Space Marines. It's not Chaos, so it's probably just decorative. Also, the face is going to be that same colour as well. I do come back to the Steel Legion Drab for a few other things, but I was jumping back and forth with this model as I had lots of stuff on. Next, for the cloak, I'm going to use Dryad Bark and keep it nice and dark. Didn't want it too bright, as I figured the entire video will just use a lot of dark colours and a lot of muted colours, which is something I'm used to doing anyway. This is a very thin paint, as you can tell, and it's going to take 3 or 4 layers to get a nice smooth coat of this. Now, after the Dryad Bark, we're going to mix in a small amount of Gawthor Brown. It's up to you how much Gawthor Brown you put in, but if you put in a very small amount and then go over your highlights and then put in a little bit more, you're going to get a better result than if you just go 50-50. As you can see there with the glazing, how thin that paint is, and it's basically just coloured water. And when it comes to glazing, just pull from the area that you don't want the paint in to the area you want the paint in, because that's where the paint will stop and that's where the most pigment will sit, and that's how you get nice smooth blends. Next I'm going back in with the dryad bark, and this time I'm working it just into the creases of the cloak. The reason for that is I wasn't quite happy with some of the blends, which happens to all of us. Cloaks can be quite tricky. Andy was doing a video the other day and he just decided to use wet blending, and I kind of liked the result from that. But yeah, I'm just working it into those middle parts and then feathering it out and glazing it out the other way. Now on the box art for this, there is scuff marks on the coat, coat or cloak, I'm not sure which one it's supposed to be. So I used Talon Sand and a Winsor Newton, and basically I'm putting small lines and specks in random patterns around the outer edges of the cloak. This is quite time consuming, but I was also feathering them out ever so slightly in places. I don't think that's as necessary, because in a minute we're going to glaze over these to fade them back in. So if they go on a bit strong, don't worry, you can put washers and filters over it to tone them down. And here we go, putting on a very thin Talon Sand glaze, just towards the edges where the coat is the most scuffed, and that little bit of Talon Sand colour is going to blend in with the Gawthor brown. It's just going to tone down any hard brush lines that I did with the previous Talon Sand with the Winsor Newton. This isn't a technique I've tried before, so it's a bit of an experiment for me as well, but it does start to look like a weathered coat. After that I'm going to water down some null oil and work that over the entirety of the coat. At this point I'm pulling the null oil upwards because the chaplain does have a backpack that's going to be stuck on later, so I need some shade on the underneath. And also it means the bits of the coat that fray out there or flow out there are going to have the lighter ends on them and make it look like they're catching the light, and add a little bit more movement to the coat itself. Now for the metallic work, you can't see most of the metallic work because the way the legs are in the coat, but we're just going to use Gunmetal by Model Air Metallic for those. Then we will put a wash on and probably just highlight them back up with the same colour. I just threw this in, so if you're doing the bits on the arms or maybe the backpack, this would be the colour that you use for that. Now I decided to go for Balthazar Gold on the shoulder trim for the right shoulder pad. It's not a colour I use very often, but I didn't want to use Woodblock Bronze or any darker colour. I wanted it to be quite vibrant and a little bit warm. Now just be really careful with this that you don't get it on any of the black arm that you've spent time doing. Now for the gun, I wanted it to stand out but not too much, and I'm basically just following the cover art for this model at this point. I'm just using a corn red. It's a rich dark red, and we can build up from that, and we can darken it down if we need to with crimson or null oil washers. You just want to be careful and do a couple of coats of that nice and thin. Try not to get any on the decorative stuff, as we're going to paint that a different colour later on, and you don't want to fill in the gaps on the wings for the Aquila. After corn red, I jumped back to Games Workshop Zandri Dust to start highlighting the bone work that we've done, which you probably could have guessed, pretty simple step. It's what Games Workshop would recommend using for this, although I wish I'd changed it a little bit so it contrasted a bit more with the scrolls that roll down his front. I am leaving the previous colour in the centre of the rib cage there and just working on the ribs themselves. Now with the face, you want to be working on the brow, the top of the nose and the top of the mouth, and then individually on the teeth. Going back to the Talon Sand again with the Winsor Newton to do another layer of scuffing, just to sharpen them up a little bit here and there. So it looks like there's layers of scuff and they've got different depth to them and they've happened at different times. I just wanted to break it up that little bit more because for me it looked a bit flat and plain. Like literally it had just been painted on, and it wasn't the effect that I wanted, so I wanted to tune that up by just going around those edges, putting about half as many marks on, or even less than we previously did. After that, we're going to do another null oil and lamiate medium wash, and at this point they all really tone together and start to look weathered. As you can see, that's a very thin wash. We're just using this as a filter, although I did have a problem with the pooling at the bottom because the way the model sits on the cork stand. So if you've got a way of holding them upside down on something, that would be advisable while it dries. After the null oil, I'm going to use Rhinox hide, and we're going to use that for his belt and his gun pouch, or his holster, because it's quite a rich brown. It's quite a reddish one, so it'll complement the gun and it'll also stand out enough from his coat. So that seemed to be a decent colour for that. And also he's got some more of those on the back as well, so don't forget about those. It's easy with a model like this to miss some of the fine details that they've put on. After that, I'm going to start highlighting those using Dark Flesh Tone by Game Colour, which is not one we use very often, but it's a slightly more reddish brown than the Rhinox hide, so it does work as a very nice highlight for it. As you can see, again, glazing and just feathering up the tops of those, and working towards those high points, and it's just a regular standard Games Workshop brush. Just do a couple of layers, working the paint from the dark recesses to the edges, and it will start to really warm up those pouches. After that, just to make sure it's toned together nicely, we're going to add an Agrax Earthshade wash. The reason we use this one is because it's actually a more reddish wash than the Army Painter Strong Tone that you may think I would have used. But I wanted to enrich those warm red colours instead of muting them down, so the Agrax Earthshade was really good for that. You can really see when it's put on there that it brightens it up. It will dry darker, but you can see the colours become much more vibrant with that filter over the top. Next up, I decided to go with a straight Zandri dust as a base for these scrolls. Now, I hope this comes out okay on camera for you guys, as the highlights don't show up very well because I've obviously got the brightness turned up on the camera because the model's actually quite dark. So I hope that shows up well for you. Just do several layers. Alright, next up we're going to be using Carrick Stone, and we're not going to do an entire highlight with this. We're just going to highlight the raised areas of these, and that's how we're going to give the scrolls a bit of dynamic movement to them. As that part that I'm painting there is raised, I'm just going to feather and glaze Carrick Stone over that. The top parts that are attached to his chest, they will also be highlighted at the top section. But you really want these highlights to land specifically in places that just make a beam of light or a light spot go across them, so it looks like they're all flowing in the wind. After the Carrick Stone, I'm going to work an Agrax Earthshade into the areas, from the Carrick Stone into the Zandri dust, but from the areas that we missed and were just basically Zandri dust, so that way we're going to enrich the darker Zandri dust, and the Carrick Stone's really going to add that movement and be accentuated by it. And after that, the Carrick Stone areas, we're going to pick up the Carrick Stone again, and we're going to add an even smaller highlight to those raised areas, just bringing it in ever so slightly, and so we have a very small, much brighter area on there. And at this point, at least for me, with the eyes, well, using my eyes and not looking at it through a camera, this did start to brighten those up and give them a nice sense of movement. But of course, they are looking quite plain, so we're going to do something else with those later on. Now, as I decided to do this chaplain as a Raven Guard, I'm going to need to paint this shoulder pad white. So, the best way to do that, to paint black over whites, is to use a brown. I decided to use Morning Fang brown. You've probably seen me do this in other tutorials, but it works so well. I'm just going to paint a couple of layers of Moldfang brown on here. Then later on we're just going to start throwing a grey or a white over it, and it's going to give a nice even coating. Now after that I decided that the bone needed a wash as well, so we did a Reclam Flesh shade. It's watered down, and it took a couple of layers because I didn't want to make the bone too orangey, but I also needed it to stand out against the other bone colours on the model, as they were quite similar in style and paint scheme. So to make it stand out, we're just going to use different filters over the top of them, and that's going to break up all those parts. Now I'm going to use Sky Grey by Model Colour. Again, it's going to be a couple of thin coats, but it really does cover that brown very well, so never try and paint whites over your blacks. It's going to take a lot of coats. You're going to just cover the model in a very thick, horrible paint, and it's just not the way to do it. But this technique will always work. I can't recommend it enough. I think that took 2, maybe 3 very thin layers. As you can see, the thin layers, they don't take that long to do because they're so thin. You're just pushing small amounts of pigment around, then let it dry. Rune Lord Brass is then going to be blended from the very top of the shoulder pad trim down to the midsection and then back up, so it fades out into that Balthazar gold on the underneath of it. And if done right, that will pretty much highlight and shade that all in one go. As you can see, I'm just pulling it up, and the very top will be Balthazar gold. I also decided here to do the outer trim there, so it looks like the light's bouncing off of it. Went back to the gun to use a bit of Mephiston red as I think that's the first highlight on that. Basically working from around those edges, but the top part of the gun is almost going to be completely Mephiston red, and then we're going to work from the bottom of the gun and pull up so the top half of that is also Mephiston red. That's just going to make the corn red that's sat underneath it look like it's much richer and give a lot more depth. After the Mephiston red, we're going to put some scroll work, well, we're going to put some writing on the scrolls, and for this we're using the black by scale 75 again and a Winsor Newton series 7. And how I do this is I don't try and do a line from left to right doing squiggles. I literally just do lots of downstrokes next to another, like you do a little tally chart, and because the area is so small, the eye can't differentiate between the fact whether there's a gap there or there isn't a gap, so it does just look like writing. So just lots of individual strokes, and you work from your left to your right, and because the area is so small, they will join up in places, and it does look like writing. So we need to get a nice regal cane. So I started with Screamer Pink by Games Workshop. One of the reasons I use Screamer Pink for this is because we've got a lot of other reds on there. I needed something else as a base to tone the reds slightly different. Otherwise we're going to end up with just red, black and brown. Although that's a good set of contrast colours, and probably you could probably follow this tutorial thinking about it for the Black Templars as well if you wanted to. Now we're going to start highlighting all those diamonds, sorry. We're going to highlight all those diamonds, the whole lot of diamonds with corn red. But later on we're going to start doing less and less on the diamonds, bringing the paintbrush to the top areas. You want to be careful this doesn't run into your recesses and take away the contrast you've got there between the pink and the red. And after that we're going to be using Druchii Violet. Very thin down, and we're going to tone the whole thing. This is going to make the Screamer Pink look a little bit more purpley pink, and it's also going to tone that red a little bit more regal that we've put on there. It's also going to put more depth into the creases on the cane as well. The cane did take some time, and we'll talk about that in the summary at the end. After the Drushi Violet, I'm going to just highlight the shoulder pad again with an off-white by monocolour, just for this top corner where the light would hit the most. It is unfortunate that we could not find a Raven Guard decal in our collection of decals, so it will just be getting left plain. Didn't have time to try and do any freehand on it either, but I will recommend that if you're going to put a decal on the shoulder pad, don't glue the backpack on. Save the backpack till right at the end. The book on his waist I started using XV88 because I wanted to use a red leather to match everything else, but I wanted it to look really weathered, so instead of using a red and then weathering it, I decided I would just make the base coat a weathered colour and then work reds over the top of that. And XV88 is good for worn leathers. It's just got that sandy leather colour, and apply that because it's a base in a few thin coats. Now Doombull Brown is then watered down into a wash consistency, as you can see, and I'm just going to gently filter over the top of the XV88 with that and just let it sit and dry. It's nothing really complicated there, but that is going to take a couple of layers of that, and what it's going to do is it's not the pooling you're looking for, it's the different textures in those layers. It's going to start adding a weathered effect. Now we're back to the corn red. At this time we're only doing the top halves of the diamonds now. You're basically painting in a little upside down V shape and then colouring in the middle section, and you're going to repeat this process all the way down the cane, and it is very time consuming. That's why I'm using the Winsor Newton as well, so I can keep in control of that. Then we're going to highlight the top quarters of those diamonds with Mephiston red. At this point you're literally doing almost just a little triangle on the top, basically a little tick shape, so it gets quicker the less paint you have to put on, to be honest, but it's good to feather it out if you're able to do so. And once all that's done, it will start to look pretty decent, although like I said, I'm going to talk about that some more at the end. After the Mephiston red, we need to make this look even more regal, so I went for Retributor armour by Games Workshop. It's not a colour I use at all, but I thought it would make quite a vibrant base. Again, I'm going to tone all these down to the red spectrum, but as a base it was vibrant enough to show through whatever washes I was going to put on and whatever filters, and still look quite gold, so it ended up being quite a good choice for this. And currently that stands out a lot, but we're going to use a Reclin Flesh shade. This is watered down a little bit, but not much. We're going to tone this whole thing a sort of warm orange gold now. You want to be careful you don't let it pull too much in the eye sockets of the skull and in the teeth, for sort of immediately take away a lot of that detail, and it'll dry cloudy as well, and that's not a look you want to go for. Next up, we're simply going to highlight it with Runelord Brass. The other trinkets on his belt as well were done in the same fashion. You will see little improvements being done off camera here, but they're just the same colours that have been used, and I've explained for each part. Well, they're the same pieces, and I've explained the colours somewhere else on the model. With the skull, we're going to work this Runelord Brass over the eyebrows and over the teeth and the eyes, around the eye sockets, just to really bring those details out. For these beads, I'm not sure what they are. I just decided to go for a brass scorpion, as when it came to metallics I was using a lot of different metallic paints on here and it was getting a bit confusing, so I just went for something simple, and basically I almost left them brass scorpion. I think I may have added a little bit of silver to that brass scorpion later on before the oil wash and highlighted them, but they really didn't need much, as the model is quite busy and has a lot going on. Now, as an edge highlight for most of my metallic parts, except for the staff, we're going to use Model Air metallic steel, but anyone who watches the channel knows I will use that all the time for edge highlighting most things now when they're metallic. It's just the right colour for it. It just gives a absolutely perfect sharp metal edge look. Just work that all the way around the details of the bolter and the backpack as well, which I've now stuck on, which I wish I hadn't, but it's definitely a model that should be built and painted in sub-assembly. The books, I was going to do some grey pages in it, but I didn't want it to take away from the black on the armour. So what we did is we just went for a straight Zandri dust on these with a few layers. And later on when I do a pin wash, that's going to pretty much finish off the pages of the book as it's able to get right in there. And the seal, again, I needed another combination of reds to use, but I did start with a cold red to make it match, but I wanted the seal to stand out a little bit more amongst the other reds and browns. So basically it's just a nice layer of corn red. This particular seal's got the skull on it, so I'm going to try and pick some of that out with the highlight colours as well. After that, I'm going to use Evil Sun's Scarlet around the top edges of the seal. That's really going to make it look a little bit more orange and vibrant. And already it stands out a bit more from all the other colours and all the other bits that are hanging off the chaplain. This video ended up taking a lot longer than I thought it would, because it doesn't look like there's that much on the chaplain, but once you start putting details into him, yeah, you can get really carried away with all the layers and colours. And to tone down the Evil Sun's Scarlet, we're just going to use a Caribou Crimson, watered down, but that's going to tone down those reds in the centre to a nice purple, purpley red, and the top where the Evil Sun's is going to stay a contrasting vibrant red. And I think after that there's only one other red we end up using, and I think that's we use a Wazdaka red to highlight the gun, or the red work on the gun, just around the top edges and top corners. If you want to, you can mix your Wazdaka red with a bit of Rakarth flesh, and that gives it a much more muted red colour, and is really good for highlighting that sort of red. But I just wanted to go for a straight Wazdaka red because I wanted to get this one finished at this point. And then, as you can see, that staff that we did, that was still quite bright. So I decided water down some Agrax Earthshade, tone that Runelord brass together with the Retributor armour and Reclam flesh shade that we did, and that'll really weather that a little bit and finish that off so it matches everything else, so it doesn't stand out too much. And there you have it, guys. It took a long time, longer than I thought, but I did have a lot of fun mucking around with some of the techniques on him. The staff, as you can see there, the blending effect had worked but on the reds, but I did wish that I'd taken it up another colour. So basically just follow that Games Workshop brand and go up another colour for the very top corners. And obviously the pin wash now has really pulled all those details together. Could have done edge highlighting on some of the black if I wanted to. You probably can, there's nothing stopping you doing that. If I wanted to improve this model, what I would have done is all the last highlights, I would have then taken them up just another paint or two, and that's basically how you end up with a much better quality paint job. So thanks for watching, guys. I know it's been a long one, and we have some thank yous to our patrons who help support this channel and help pay for models like this that then go into our monthly giveaways. So a big thank you to D-Wack, Warren, Love Minis, the Oak Boys, Joe Spearpoint, Ludwig Hofbauer, Kit Lindquist and Acmas of Dawn. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for helping support the channel. If you want to join them and help support the channel, links are in the description, as well as links to the Outpost, which is our affiliate link, where you can get brand new models at a second-hand price, as well as paints, brushes and all the good stuff you need for the hobby. So I do hope you like that, and if you do, please hit like. Don't forget to subscribe, because we have tons more videos coming out, as well as the ones we've already got. and don't forget to share on your social media because that helps us out a lot. And that's it from us. We will see you in the next one with some more Imperial stuff, I believe. Right, thanks for watching, guys.